In the year 1162, on the vast grasslands of northeastern Mongolia, a child was born into a world of constant violence and survival. His name was Temüjin. His father, Yesige, was a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, a man of standing, but without great power. According to legend, the newborn came into the world clutching a blood clot in his fist. To those present, it was an omen. History would prove them right. Temüjin was only 9 years old when his world collapsed. His father, Yesugei, was poisoned by Tatar enemies while returning from a journey, a common fate in the brutal politics of the steppe. With their chief dead, the Borjigin clan abandoned Hulun and her children. The family was left alone on the grasslands with almost nothing, no horses, no allies, no protection. What followed were years of grinding poverty, scavenging for roots and small game to survive. The years of poverty sharpened Temüjin into someone calculating and ruthless even as a child. In a bitter dispute over food and scarce resources, he killed his older half-brother Begter. It was not an act of impulse. It was a deliberate assertion of dominance. Within his own family, in the harshest circumstances imaginable, Temüjin was already making brutal decisions to secure his position. It was the first sign of what he would become. Not long after, Temüjin's growing reputation made him a target. The Taichi Ute clan, a rival group, captured him and enslaved him, forcing him to wear a heavy wooden kang around his neck as a humiliation and restraint for a proud young man who had already killed to assert himself. This captivity was a test of endurance. He eventually escaped with the help of a sympathetic guard named Sorkan Shira. Slipping away in the night, the experience left him with a permanent understanding of betrayal and of loyalty. Upon gaining his freedom, Temüjin sought to rebuild what his father had lost. One of his first moves was to claim Better, the young woman his father had betrothed him to years earlier from the Angirat tribe. The marriage was not merely personal, it was political. The Angirat were a respected tribe, and the union brought Temüjin his first formal alliance and a sense of restored dignity. Berthe would remain his principal wife and closest partner throughout his life. The peace did not last. The Merkit tribe, who harbored an old grievance against Temüjin's family, struck swiftly and abducted Berthe. It was a devastating blow, both personal and political. To reclaim her, Temüjin reached out to two powerful men, Togrul, the aging ruler of the Kariot Confederation, who owed a debt of loyalty to Temüjin's late father, and Jamuka, his own sworn blood brother. Together, they began assembling a force large enough to take on the Merkit. The Allied force launched a night raid against the Merkit camps. The attack was swift and total. The Merkit were overwhelmed and scattered. Berthe was recovered unharmed. For Temüjin, the campaign was far more than a rescue mission. It was proof that he could command a multi-tribal coalition, plan coordinated operations across open terrain, and deliver decisive results. Word spread across the steppe. Temüjin was no longer just a survivor, he was a leader worth following. After the campaign, Temüjin and Jamuka traveled and camped together for about a year and a half, a period of close partnership between two ambitious men. But their visions for leadership were fundamentally different. Jamuka favored the old tribal aristocracy. Temüjin promoted men based on skill and loyalty, regardless of birth. Eventually, Temüjin's followers separated from Jamuka's camp in a quiet but decisive break. The two former brothers were now on a collision course. Over the following decade, Temüjin waged a relentless campaign of consolidation. He did not simply conquer tribes, he dismantled them. Defeated warriors were absorbed into his own forces as equals, while tribal leaders who resisted were eliminated. He used a combination of overwhelming force, strategic marriage alliances, and promises of plunder to flip loyalties. One by one, the great confederations of the eastern steppe, the Tatars, the Merkits, the Karats, the Naimans, were brought to heel or destroyed. The Tatars were special targets. They had poisoned Temüjin's father, and he had not forgotten. When he finally defeated them in battle, he ordered every Tatar male taller than the height of a wagon axle to be executed, effectively eliminating the adult male population of the tribe in a single decree. Women and children were absorbed into Mongol clans. The tribe ceased to exist as an independent entity. It was a calculated act of total political erasure, not merely revenge. Even Temüjin's most important patron was not safe. Togrul, the aging Khan of the Karaita Confederation, had been a valuable ally, but as Temüjin's power grew, Togrul and his advisors began to see him as a threat rather than a partner. The resulting conflict ended in 1203 with the complete defeat of the Karaite. Togrul fled and was killed by Naimans. The largest remaining confederation on the central steppe had collapsed. Temüjin now had no rivals of comparable strength. In 1204, Temüjin turned to the Naiman Confederation in the west, the most powerful remaining force on the steppe. The Naiman were better equipped and held higher ground, but Temüjin's forces were better organized, faster, and more cohesive. After a decisive engagement, Naiman resistance crumbled. Their leader died fleeing the field. With the Naiman destroyed, every major independent tribal power in the region had been eliminated. The unification of the Mongol world was nearly complete. Jamuka, Temüjin's old blood brother and the last symbolic rival for leadership of the Mongol world, met his end in 1205. Abandoned by his followers, who chose to surrender him to Temüjin, hoping for reward, Jamuka was brought before the man who had once been his closest companion. According to tradition, Temüjin offered him his life. Jamuka refused. He requested execution without the shedding of blood, a noble death reserved for those of rank. Temüjin granted it. The last rival was gone. In the spring of 1206, the leaders of every Mongol tribe gathered at the source of the Anon River for a grand Kurultai, a formal assembly of the people. Before this gathering, Temüjin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the oceanic lord of all, who lived in felt tents. A great white standard of 9 tails was raised in his honor. The Mongol nation, for the first time in its history, was a single unified state with a single leader. The age of conquest was about to begin. One of Genghis Khan's first acts as ruler was to restructure the entire Mongol military and social order. He abolished the old tribal divisions and replaced them with a decimal system. Units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 soldiers, each with a commander directly accountable to him. Promotion was based on merit and loyalty, not birth. Old tribal identities were deliberately broken up, with families from rival clans mixed together. The Mongols were no longer a collection of tribes. They were an army. Genghis Khan also established the Yasa, a code of law unlike anything the steppe had known before. It governed military conduct, trade, theft, murder, and the treatment of foreign peoples. One of its most striking provisions was the guarantee of religious freedom across the empire. Shamans, Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists were all to be tolerated. This was not idealism, it was pragmatism. A stable empire required cooperation, not constant religious conflict. The Yasa gave the Mongol Empire its administrative spine. With the Mongol nation unified and organized, Genghis Khan turned outward. The first major target was the Tangut Kingdom of Xixia in northwestern China, a wealthy state that controlled key routes into China proper. Between 1207 and 1209, the Mongols launched 3 separate campaigns against the Tangut, steadily reducing their capacity to resist. By 1209, Xixia had submitted, agreed to pay regular tribute, and acknowledged Mongol suzerainty. The gateway to China was open. In 1211, Genghis Khan launched his assault on the Jin dynasty, the powerful Jurchen Empire that ruled northern China. The Jin were far larger and more established than any enemy the Mongols had yet faced. With millions of subjects, stone cities, and professional armies. But Genghis Khan did not charge walls. He used speed, deception, and devastating cavalry raids to strip the countryside bare, choke the Jin supply lines, and pick apart their armies one engagement at a time. Within 4 years, the Jin had been pushed to the brink. In 1215, the Mongols captured Zhongdu, the great capital of the Jin dynasty, a city of perhaps 1 million inhabitants. The siege had lasted years. When the city finally fell, it was systematically looted. Bones and ash reportedly covered the ground for miles outside the walls for years afterward. A Chinese ruler sat humiliated while a new order imposed itself on northern China. Genghis Khan did not stay to administer the conquered territories himself. He appointed trusted commanders and turned his attention westward. In 1218, the Mongols eliminated the Karakai Khitanate in Central Asia, a relatively swift campaign that brought Mongol authority to the eastern borders of the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the most powerful Islamic states in the world. The Khwarezmian Shah controlled Persia, Afghanistan, and much of Central Asia. For a moment, there was the possibility of peaceful commerce between the two powers. Genghis Khan sent a trade delegation of nearly 500 merchants to open relations. It would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation by the Shah. The governor of the city of Otrar seized the Mongol trade caravan, accused the merchants of being spies, and had them all massacred, approximately 450 people. When Genghis Khan sent diplomatic envoys demanding justice, Shah Muhammad II had the chief ambassador executed and the others humiliated. In the strategic logic of the steppe, this was not an insult to be absorbed. It was a declaration of war. Genghis Khan spent the next year preparing the largest single military campaign of his career. In the autumn of 1219, Genghis Khan led an army estimated at between 100,000 and 150,000 soldiers into the Khwarezmian Empire. It was not one army moving in one direction. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged invasion designed to confuse, overwhelm, and isolate. One column under his sons swept south. Genghis Khan himself led a force on a northern route. His generals Jibi and Subutai struck from the east. The Shah's enormous army never found a battle it could win. One by one, the great cities of the Khwarezmian Empire fell. Bukhara in February 1220, Samarkand in March, Urgench after a brutal siege, and Merv, reportedly one of the largest cities on earth at the time. In 1221, each city faced a similar choice: surrender and face reduced harm, or resist and face total destruction. Many that resisted were razed. The human cost was catastrophic. Later Islamic historians recorded death tolls in the millions, though exact figures remain disputed. Entire civilizations were erased in the span of 2 years. Shah Muhammad II did not stand and fight. He fled, first from city to city, then across his crumbling empire, always one step ahead of the Mongol columns sent to pursue him. Genghis Khan dispatched his 2 finest cavalry commanders on a flying pursuit that covered thousands of kilometers through Persia and into the Caucasus. The Shah, stripped of his army and abandoned by his governors, died alone in 1220 on a small island in the Caspian Sea, reportedly without even a proper burial shroud. Rather than returning after the Shah's death, the 2 pursuing generals, Jibi and Subutai, pressed onward on one of the most extraordinary cavalry expeditions in military history. They swept through the Caucasus, defeating Georgian and Hellenic forces, then turned north into the Pontic steppe. In 1223, at the Kalka River, they shattered a combined force of Rus princes and Cuman warriors. They were not conquering, they were scouting. The report they brought back to Genghis Khan would shape the next generation of Mongol expansion. When the Tangut of Xixia refused to provide troops for the Khwarezmian campaign, Genghis Khan noted the insult and did not forget it. In 1225, with the West subdued, he turned back east and launched a final devastating campaign against the Tangut. It was systematic and merciless. Cities were taken one by one, the Tangut king captured. By 1227, Shisa, as a political and cultural entity, had effectively ceased to exist. Genghis Khan ordered its destruction to be total. It was his last campaign, and one of his most thorough. In August of 1227, while the Xixia campaign was still concluding, Genghis Khan died. He was approximately 65 years old. The exact cause of death remains unknown. Historical sources offer different accounts. A hunting injury, a fall from a horse, illness, or wounds sustained in battle. Per his own instructions, the location of his burial was kept secret. A large cortege of mounted warriors escorted his body back to Mongolia. Anyone who witnessed the procession, it is said, was killed to preserve the secret. The burial site has never been found. Genghis Khan had prepared for succession. Before his death, he named his 3rd son Egdeti as Great Khan, a choice intended to balance the competing claims of his 4 sons. The empire was formally divided: the western steppe to Jochi's heirs, Central Asia to Chagatai, Mongolia, and the heartland to Ogadei as the supreme ruler, and a rich portion of China to Tolui as the youngest son's traditional share. The empire did not fracture. It continued, and under Ogadei, it would expand further than even Genghis Khan had taken it. Under Genghis Khan's successors, the Mongol Empire reached its maximum extent. Ogadei completed the destruction of the Jin dynasty. His generals swept into Korea, Persia, and deep into Eastern Europe, reaching Poland and Hungary by 1241. The Ilkhanate would later conquer the Abbasid Caliphate and sack Baghdad. At its peak, the Mongol Empire covered approximately 24 million square kilometers roughly 16% of the Earth's total land area. No contiguous land empire before or since has matched its size. The legacy of Genghis Khan is one of the most contested in all of history. He killed on a scale that reshaped demographics across entire continents. Some estimates suggest his campaigns reduced the global population by tens of millions. And yet the empire he built also created the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability across Eurasia that allowed trade, ideas, and people to move along the Silk Road with unprecedented freedom. His administrative innovations, religious tolerance, and legal code influenced successor states for centuries. In Mongolia today, he is a founding father. Across much of Central Asia and China, the ruins of his campaigns are still visible in the landscape. Modern genetic studies suggest that roughly 16 million men alive today are direct paternal line descendants of Genghis Khan and his close relatives. He was born with nothing on an empty steppe. He died having changed the world permanently, for better and for worse. And that's it. Thank you for watching. The next story is waiting for you right here. Subscribe so you're always the first to know. Thanks for being part of this story. See you in the next one.